from her and their family life over 20 years ago, and Laurel could count the number of times she'd seen her since then on one hand, not including her thumb. Now, with this sudden request to take care of the nephew she'd seen sporadically over the years, she had no idea what to do or how to feel. Take care of him, she'd repeated dumbly, a cup of tea cooling by her elbow, her laptop screen on the current batch of edits of a medical journal, and her cat Mistral curled up in her lap. Outside the window of her study, York Minster's majestic Gothic spires pierced a wintry sky. "You mean in London?" "She's left instructions at her flat and a key with the doorman," the staff member had replied neutrally. "She said you would be amenable." Amenable? That felt rich coming from a sister who had chosen to cut herself out of Laurel's life as if she were wielding a particularly sharp pair of scissors. And yet, of course Laurel was amenable, because no matter how Abby had walked away, or how much it had hurt, she'd been there when it had mattered. Even though they'd become more or less estranged for all of Laurel's adulthood, she owed Abby her life, or at least her childhood. Her job as a freelance copy editor meant she could work from anywhere, and things were slow around Christmas as it was. And so Laurel had dropped everything to come to London to look after Zac, picking him up from school to both their bewilderment. He barely knew who she was, and she'd had to ask a teacher to point him out. Awkward didn't even begin to cover it. And yet, despite all that, Laurel had been buoyed by an indefatigable optimism that had been the touchstone of her life. Admittedly, some of her friends had pointed out, kindly, that her optimism was more naivete than anything else, and others had told her that expecting a hero worthy of a Jane Austen adaptation wasn't optimism, but delusion. And yet, Laurel kept wanting to believe life worked out in the end, that there was a reason bad things happened, that silver linings existed, even when she hadn't found them yet, that it was all ahead of her, all still going to happen. The miracle. The magic, not just with finding Mr. Right, but with everything, with this. And so, like with everything else, she had held on to that hope with Zac. Unfortunately, he had not shared her optimism. The initial awkwardness she had understandably anticipated hadn't morphed into the friendly, let's-get-to-know-each-other sesh that Laurel had been counting on. Her expansive offer of takeaway wasn't seen as a treat, but a given. Her attempts at conversation had been utterly shut down before she had barely begun, and a hostility had emanated from Zac towards her that left her feeling hurt and raw, even as she told herself not to take it personally. Sometimes, when a 14-year-old was giving her a glare of death and an eye roll for the 20th time that hour, it was hard not to. It had all taken Laurel rather miserably by surprise. The last time she had seen Zac, during a flyby visit to London a few years ago, when Abby had reluctantly agreed to meet up, he had been a round-faced 11-year-old, puberty no more than a faint cloud on the horizon. He doodled on his placemat and asked her questions about football, and actually listened to her admittedly ignorant answers. Still, he'd been sweet. The gangly 6'2" stranger her nephew had turned into during the intervening years had completely taken her aback. His voice was deep, his attitude irritable or indifferent in turns, and his fingers appeared to be glued to his phone. Laurel didn't know what to do with any of it. She realized a Happy Meal and a game of Go Fish wasn't going to cut it, not by a long mark. She still didn't understand why Abby had separated herself from her family as soon as she had left for university. Visits a thing of the past, phone calls and emails eventually going unreturned. Laurel had never worked up the courage to ask her, had felt too hurt and even betrayed to dare to voice it out loud, afraid of what the answer might be, even as she knew no answer would satisfy, no reason would be good enough to justify her sister's behavior.